presumably trees and whatnot. So the way you do that, just bear with me, live severe television here, is that you look for what's called a correlation coefficient, which is going to show me different size debris. So let's see, correlation coefficient. And we're looking for that within the storm. It's a little messy. There's something there. Let's try those rotation tracks here. So this is kind of, if you will, a slightly dumbed down version of the velocity data I was showing you, which shows you where the rotation is occurring. So it's just taking an algorithm of the rotation and saying this is where there's likely some sort of rotation and perhaps a tornado on the ground, which of course corresponds very well to our storm. If we match it up to a correlation coefficient at the end there, that might just be noise coming off of it. Badly timed noise, I would say. But let's go back to that velocity, and we're going to shorten up this loop a little bit here because this is the real key to these storms, and get in here a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it still looks pretty good. So I think the National Weather Service will, obviously, I don't know how long this tornado warning continues, but it makes sense that it is still warned, that they're not dissolving it at this point. It's a little bit on the messy side for a couplet. Your really strong couplets, you'll see almost like a circle, and you've got, in our case, you would have red on the right side and then green on the left side, or kind of to the southwest side of this storm system. So this is the reason that they warned it. Obviously, if you have, if you're out this way and you can report to us, safely do so, because that is worth a lot when it comes down to what's on the ground versus what the radar is just indicating may be happening. It is our duty and National Weather Service duty to err on the conservative side and to put these warnings out to be safe. But the best way to know, frankly, is to have somebody who is a watcher, a spotter. And that's really what we need to know what's going on here beyond what we're seeing on the radar. And so there's that storm. And again, watch these storms. So what happens with some of these is, obviously this storm is catching enough shear or change in wind direction in the atmosphere in order to turn tornadic or look like it's tornadic. So that means that these storms that are kind of downstream here also have that potential, as they get into the same area, into the same zone, that they can start spinning. And you see this quite a bit in Maine, out towards Sebago Lake, for example, a spot that we see as far as Maine goes, quite a bit of tornado activity and some water spout activity. And that's because that's a zone, a convergence zone, between these thunderstorms and between the wind direction that's turning. So that's why this tornado warned storm could be one that we're watching off to the south and west going forward as well. All right, let's widen this picture back out, check for some other storms. Again, the meat of this system is back here into the Champlain Valley of Vermont still. And if it were a different time of the year, chances are that we wouldn't be able to get this all the way through.
We want you to keep
but
talking.
Okay.
He's going to throw another mic.
All right. Okay. We got another mic. Sorry.
We're going to continue talking.
Yes.
All the way through on weather.
Okay.
To our Bangor North office.
Got it. All right.
We're going to do a separate newscast downstairs.
Got it. All right. For those of you watching, just a little live TV here. We got a double mic, so we can get to a couple different audiences here. So you're seeing everything but me putting on makeup today, as far as the behind the scenes part goes. But again, these storms back to the west are the ones that we're going to be watching for a broader spot, a broader area later this afternoon and into this evening, because of the time of the year, as I was getting to there before the mic situation. Because of the time of the year, these storms could make it here because it'll be 8 o'clock or 8:30, and still we'll just be setting the sun there. All right, let's go back. Let's go back to our tornado warned system. It looks as though they've, I believe they've extended that tornado warning because they've got another box on top of that. I'm going to walk off screen quickly and have a look at what that tornado warning information says, or if they just trim the back end of that tornado warning. They do that sometimes as they move off to the northeast. They are continuing it. Thank you, Jess. So now valid till 4:15. Obviously still looks pretty good. The velocity, let's check the velocity again. Yeah, and again, we're in a little bit of a tough zone here as far as sampling goes. There are only so many sweet spots, especially when you get into mountains between you and the radar, where you get a good scan of that velocity data at different tilts in the radar. But this is, they feel at least it is sufficient to continue this tornado warning, and I'm going to just query that and show you that it is valid until 4:15, and I'm going to read some of the text off here if I can that comes from the National Weather Service, so just bear with me here. The National Weather Service, all right, let's see here, okay. All right, yeah. Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you, Jess. I'm coming back over the wall in a second, guys. So yeah, they're just saying radar indicated tornado. So they're seeing the same thing as we are. Located near Churchill Dam, 16 miles southeast of Clayton Lake, moving northeast at 30 miles an hour now. They're pinning it at, I believe they had 35 before, but either way, it's in that ballpark. I'm just going to come back over here to the wall and show you that's, again, that's what we're watching here, and they've decided to extend it, feeling that the velocity scans look good enough and the atmosphere is primed enough that they'll continue that warning. Guys, in the control room, am I switching this IFB to another IFB? Because I don't have two IFBs, so I believe I'm going to go over. Isaac, do you know, am I going over to this IFB altogether? Okay, stand by. Just going to take this one. Okay. All right. All right, I got you. Okay. All right, guys. I lost feedback here. I can't see myself on the green screen. But again, this radar indicated tornado moving off to the north and east. The velocity scans are what we're going to continue to look at here. There is more activity to the southwest of that storm, and you do sometimes have to watch these because once they get into that zone where they want to rotate, then each storm that comes out individually will try to rotate as well. And so that's not always the case, but sometimes when conditions are favorable like that, then you can get that thunderstorm in and they start to spin similarly to what that lead cell is doing right now. So we'll continue to watch that and the cells behind it. The cells behind it, by the way, are severe thunderstorm warned cells. So that is worth noting. They are also severe. They're just not considered tornadic at this time. So the severe threats are going to be hail. We've got some straight line winds that we're watching too, I believe up to 60 miles an hour. And in addition to that, we've got torrential rain, which, by the way, is not by itself a severe thunderstorm characteristic, but it can cause its own problems for obvious reasons. So that's the cell that we're watching. I'm going to try to go back and show you the wide picture again. And what's interesting about this particular cluster, and I'm just going to go off screen here for a second, what's interesting about this particular cluster of storms is that it's actually on the warm front nose side of things, and most of the severe weather that we were going to be watching today was likely to be on the cold front side, but that hasn't been the case. This is kind of still on the warm nose, which is the warm front coming through. And again, watch those storms like this one coming out of Canada here. That's a definite hailer just based on the reflectivity. It will continue northeast along the same path as where we have that tornado warned cell right now. So we're going to have to watch those because once they get training like that, not only can they spin more, but also you can end up with flash flooding concerns in addition to what you have as far as the tornado risk there. Is continuing to be our main concern. Let's see if we can switch over. There's the other look at it here, and there's your tornado warned system. And that couplet actually looking a little bit more healthy there recently. Guys, just so you know, and you may still be working on this, I still have no feedback as far as where I am relative to the screen. So there is your couplet there. There we go. Thank you. There's your couplet coming into the kind of the center here of this tornado warned box, and this is valid until 4:15 in the afternoon. And these tornado warnings, they typically try to trim them if they can. Sometimes severe thunderstorm warnings they'll let roll out, meaning the thunderstorm has kind of outrun the box and they'll just leave the box till it expires. But because of the nature of tornado warnings, they will often try to trim those and cancel them as soon as they can so that people don't feel like there's danger if there isn't. I'm going to go over and look at a couple of things here. Yeah, Julie, I'm good. The only thing is I can hear the show downstairs in my ear. So we're going to look at the correlation coefficient, which if you were with me earlier, you would know is a way to see whether or not debris is being thrown into the air. Now, of course, there's not a lot of buildings here, but what you're really looking at in a situation like this is basically is a tornado ripping up branches and small trees and tossing those around. If so, then you will see it on this debris finder or correlation coefficient. And I would say there's nothing too conclusive there. There is a little bit of an echo going along with that cell, but I would guess more likely what you're looking at there is a bit of a hail shaft. So the hail is a bigger size, obviously, than rain is, so it shows up as a correlation coefficient difference, and hail comes off that. So that's what that yellow spike most likely is. Otherwise, I mean, that would be a heck of a signature for just what would likely be a weaker tornado. So they're coming back off to the south and west. Again, let's watch this one. It's going to sail just north of the Jackman area. Well, actually quite a bit north of Jackman, to be fair. But that cell looks pretty nasty too, coming out here. You can tell just by looking at it, it's a good size hailer. So it likely will be severe if nothing else. As far as the tornadic capabilities of it, we'll have to wait to see when it crosses over more into our radar section here. I would say that the cell that's tornado warned, it's still valid until 4:15. I would argue it looks a little weaker now, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it looks a little weaker now. As far as its couplet, it's a bit of a messy couplet now. It doesn't really have a good solid look to it anymore. So that's good news, I would say. As I mentioned before, we are in a weird sampling zone between the radar and this cell where we've got mountains, we've got a height problem, so we're probably catching kind of the mid-levels of the storm, not the low levels where you would see tornadoes sit typically. Hail tracker, though, I think also will show you the same thing, which is I believe that this cell is a little bit on the downtrend, which is good. Now, sometimes with these cells that try to be tornadic, what will happen at the end of their life cycle is they'll just start basically puking out rain. I mean, they become high precipitation cells, and they start throwing down a ton of rain at the end, especially when you have a ton of precipitable water in the atmosphere, as we do today. If you've been outside, you know that. It's very, very humid out there. And so that is kind of what you look for. You want the hail to get a little smaller. You want it to start raining itself out more. And then typically you feel like that thunderstorm is in the decline as far as its life cycle goes. Just to progress this forward, and we'll go back to that cell in a second, there are going to be more thunderstorm cells later this afternoon, this evening, and it looks like some of them will come in after dark tonight. So Jess and I will obviously keep an eye on that. As to where exactly they fall, computer models don't do a great job with that. They know they'll be around, but they're not going to do a great job pinpointing convection as we're seeing out there today. So again, looking at the scan here, it's still probably putting down some hail, and the one behind it probably has some hail too. You do end up with a situation, if cells get too close, they start becoming more of a line, which is less tornadic usually. Typically when you get a line going, it's not going to be as conducive to spinning. You want the storms to stay more separate, and that gives you a better chance of seeing some rotation. Not that we're looking for that, but just in this context here. And so as these storms get a little bit congealed, I think they'll become weaker, what they call multicellular. So in general, that is something that you look for, and that's a positive sign when they get a little bit closer. And again, the couplet, right now, doesn't blow my socks off as far as spin. And I'm assuming, Jess, we haven't heard from anybody as far as spotters. It's pretty sparse up that way. Yeah, so this is what happens. This would be potentially a warning they could cancel if it went over a more populated area, because you'd be able to just say, like, more or less, it's spinning, but it's not hitting the ground. But since we do not know, it's harder. They're gonna probably hang this warning straight to 4:15, I would think, because there's nothing telling them otherwise. But again, the hail tracker's a little weaker. The radar's getting a little like it's trying to rain itself out a little bit on that front cell at least. So that is all positive when it comes to tornadoes or not tornadoes. We knew, by the way, that we had this potential today, and I'm just going to kind of show you what was going on. You more or less have a warm front and a cold front combo, which is not unusual, but you've got it here. The front is kind of knows its way through here. That's your warm front, and then the cold front stretches back to the west, and that's what's going to come through later this afternoon and into this evening. So kind of on the warm front side, that's where some of these can spin up. To the cold front side, you can also get tornadic activity, but we're going to be later in the day, so that's going to make it just a little bit harder to get them going. This is kind of like peak heating time, peak time for severe storms. So again, let's watch this cell as it comes out, and we're going to continue to watch this cell here and see if it shows us any more signs. I don't see anything beyond the velocity scan that would lead me to believe that this looks too impressive. I don't know. They're going to keep it probably, Jess, I think, right? Yeah, that one coming out way north of Jackman looks decent too. Yeah, and that's going to have the same problem, right? I mean, you're going to be looking at the scan, and that's really going to be the main thing as far as warning or not warning. And not to be lighthearted about it, but it makes a huge difference if you can have eyes on a storm like this. And it seems like we're getting too many reports as it heads into Aroostook County, which is not shocking. But to me, just like the structure of it just doesn't look as good anymore. It's not very tight. And so that's all positive. You know, one thing we'll have to watch for this, if this continues in this direction, and that one coming out of north of Jackman too, you may end up with some flash flooding that occurs, because these things are raining pretty good when they're not hail. We've got some pretty big rainfall amounts out of there too. So we're gonna stay with you, I think, here until this thing expires at 4:15, which I would imagine it would, based on what it looks like right now, unless we hear otherwise from the National Weather Service. And then we're going to watch those other cells that are coming across out of Canada. Not that this is like a hugely atypical setup, but it is interesting that today's severe weather threat is really is kind of mountain specific, and it doesn't look like these have much of a chance to get to the coast for a number of reasons. The air is a more marine layer. In fact, there's a fog bank along the coastline. Some of you may be sitting in that off the down east coast. But yeah, so this cell here for sure. So if you go up 201, you're going through Jackman like you're going to Quebec City. That's definitely a hailer. I mean, it's got a hail spike and everything. So now just keep in mind, what's going on here is you're actually looking at this from a different radar site. This is a different direction here. So, but it's got what's called a hail spike, and so I'm gonna find where's my little squiggly arrow? Does that come on Microsoft Paint, or where is it? There's no squiggly arrow anymore? Oh no, I needed it. Did we have a software update I missed?
Yes, we literally did.
Okay, well, I'm going to use a front to circle it, so just stay with me, guys. But this here, that's called a hail spike. So what happens is the radar samples a thunderstorm, and it reflects off the hail so much that it comes back and it creates a spike on the side. So that tells you for sure that cell is producing hail right now. I apologize for the graphics. We did not have this particular system before, and so we're all learning. But so as that storm comes into Maine, it's definitely at least going to have some hail. So they're probably going to severe warn that, I would think, unless they're preoccupied with the other one. Another indicator, and this is not always like a one-to-one thing, is that sometimes these hail-warned storms, or these hailstorms, have more lightning with them too, and that has to do with the friction in the cloud. So when you see a tight couplet, you've got a hail shaft, you've got a ton of lightning concentrated in one spot. You know, like I said, I'd bet a good amount of money that there's hail with that, and it's probably over a quarter inch. You need it to be bigger than that technically in order to get a severe thunderstorm warning out of it. So that might be what they're waiting for. Also, they have to wait for it to cross over. They can't warn a storm that's in Canada. So when this goes over, you'll probably see it. You'll probably see it warned. We don't actually have a severe thunderstorm watch in Maine yet, probably because they're kind of skirting the boundary here, and a lot of activity back here to the west and southwest. And so depending on how these storms do going through the Northeast Kingdom, which is a radar hole, unfortunately, and also coming through the Champlain Valley, if these storms can hold together, basically, I think, through the Northeast Kingdom, then a lot of these will line up into Oxford County later this afternoon and into this evening. So that'll be something that we'll obviously continue to watch as we get a little bit closer, and we hopefully can drop this. So I would say that this one looks pretty gusted out to me, this tornado warning. So we've got 5 minutes left on this warning, and I would very much imagine, unless they're seeing something I'm not at the National Weather Service, that this will be allowed to expire at 4:15 because it just doesn't have a great couplet to it left over. The hail tracker kind of left it behind too, which again indicates there's probably not big hail in this anymore. Not that they're mutually exclusive. You can absolutely have a tornado and a storm without hail, for sure. But I think more so it's showing you that the storm is on the decline in general. And so typically you're not going to spin a tornado as a storm is raining itself out into a high precipitation type cell. So actually the models did a pretty good job seeing that there'd be something up this way around this time of the day, which is no small feat when it comes to mesoscale weather here. But really more so you'll be watching these late this afternoon, early this evening, and see if they can hold together and if they can really start going here into the mountains, Oxford County especially, but all the way into our northern viewing area as well. And then things will settle down fast later tonight because we'll just lose the dynamics there. So it'll be a question of whether or not we can keep these storms together for long enough to get those severe storms and to get some more spinners in here. So these storms to the southwest, in my opinion, this is a positive. They do not look as good now. They're getting too close together now. So and this happens with hurricanes too. It's hard to get a hurricane, thankfully, right behind another hurricane because it takes a lot of the dynamics away from it. And so the same thing happens with thunderstorms sometimes. Unless you're in a squall line situation, which we don't get into a ton here, then these being this close is going to slightly preclude them from having really good severe characteristics because they become just kind of globbed together in more garden variety. So the more separated they are in this type environment, the more I'm concerned about them. But again, as it stands right now, they're starting to scrunch up on each other a little bit. So that means heavy rain is likely there, but I don't think that it's likely that we're spinning this storm anymore. Let me just check on our little friend coming over from Canada here, because that one is,
it's windy.
Yeah, it's windy. It's putting down a lot of lightning. I don't know. We could maybe do
I'm going to run downstairs.
Okay.
Chat is up.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to query the amount of lightning strikes here if possible, because for here. So now look, if you're from Louisiana originally, 30 lightning strikes per storm is nothing crazy. But for this neck of the woods, that's quite a bit of lightning. And keep in mind too, this is the only lightning that one is actually hitting the ground, so not cloud to cloud or in cloud lightning, and two, the positive strikes that are being identified by the sensing network. So, for around here, 30, 31 strikes in this small little storm means that if it rolls over you, it's quite dramatic. And within that, you've got the hail too. And so I think we're just waiting for this one to cross over into the United States in order for them to warn it, because I see no other reason they're waiting. It's got hail. Lightning technically doesn't count for severe weather, oddly enough, because it's just implied with a thunderstorm. But you've got definitely enough hail signature to think that this would be a severe thunderstorm. One last look at this scan here. I think we're about to go off the air for now, guys. Our policy is that we stay with these storms, tornado warnings, until they expire. And so it's going to expire at 4:15. And if another one pops up, we're going to be on the air in general doing our newscast. So we'll cover that in depth when that happens. But I believe at about 4:15 we will wrap this up. Again, if you're in this area where this tornado warning system is, you take it seriously. If anybody has eyes on it and they want to message us and let us know what they saw, if they have any pictures they can take safely, we always appreciate that. But I think that based on how this is looking right now, I'd say the tornado threat has passed. Oh, they disagree. We're going to keep going. They're gonna keep that one going. All right. Very interesting. I'm going to go into chat right now. National Weather Service says chat. I'm going to see what they're saying about that because it looked pretty gusted out to me. They're going to do tornado warning. Let's see what they've got to say about that. Doesn't seem like there's a ton of extra information other than that they believe that that should continue. Let me take another look at the scan here. And see what they're seeing. Okay, yeah. I mean, so right at the end there, as I was pronouncing it dead, it got a little bit better couplet right there. And I'm gonna draw this in for you here. Okay. So right here, it revived that couplet a little bit at the end, and it looks like it was just enough for them to continue that warning. Let's take a look at these scans here. So yeah, that couplet just got a little bit, it kind of came back to life on us a little bit. If you watch these scans over the last 15 minutes, like that's garbage, and then right there, it kind of comes back. And I would very much assume that's why they have decided to continue this warning. So it's good to have several sets of eyes on this. We'll look at the warning here because I'm trying to come up with town names off the top of my head here, and I have to admit I'm not coming up with a lot. So let me see if we've got a query we can do here for the warning. That will give us some information. Obviously, you know, we're moving into central Mercer County with this extended. It's now valid until 5. Okay, so we've got it 12 miles east of Churchill Dam, 25 miles southeast of Clayton Lake, moving east at 35 miles an hour. So I'm not the only one who was having trouble coming up with town names off the top of my head in that area. But this is a scan that they felt like was good enough to keep this going. We're going to go over just getting some text now from the rest of the weather team, and good suggestion from Ryan, which was that we're going to try to go over to a single site and try to declutter a little bit on this warning. So what that means is we've got sweeping radar here. We're going to go to single site here. We've got a radar composite product, which shows us all these different radars stitched together. And then we've got a sweeping radar, which is just one radar at a time, which sometimes in these severe weather situations does look a little bit better. So there we go. Here's a slightly better look. It does seem to have revived a hail core a bit. Let's loop it the last 15 minutes and see what we got going on. So yeah, I mean, from there it's a little hard to say, but let's move this over here and take a look at it. So what we're looking at specifically within this picture is that rotation area. And let me get some lines in here to draw right there. So wait for it to come into the box. In fact, I can make it even tighter. Right there is what we're looking at, which is pretty typical when you talk about a possible tornado. Your kind of classic textbook hook echo is tornado sits here-ish. You've got an echo that kind of comes back this way and looks like that. Now again, that's classic, and it's not always quite that simple. But this is, if you were to draw up what a tornado looks like in the radar, that's kind of what it looks like. So you compare that to this, and it's not as clean. It doesn't have quite as classic of a look to it, but that's no surprise because it's Maine and we're in kind of in an elevated area here. But I see that this couplet here in the last 10 minutes, it does look better. So so what this comes down to too is a couple of things. There's a good rule of thumb about you need dew points to be a certain level to get a tornado down to the ground. And so typically what you're looking at for a dew point is somewhere in the 50s at least. Otherwise you can't saturate the column to get it down to the ground. In this situation, we've got definitely moist enough air, and you're over high terrain anyway, so your base can be lower. Oh, speaking of which, we were just talking about this storm, right? And I said we're waiting for it to cross the border so they can warn it. And there you go. It is severe warned. No surprise there. That severe warning is, let me just query it, but I'm going to guess it says there's probably a lot of hail with it, based on what it looks like. Severe thunderstorm warning, northwest Somerset County, obviously. 60 mile per hour wind gusts, quarter size hail is what they're saying there. And that one looked pretty juicy coming right out of Canada. So there's no surprise. Let's put a little tracker on that one and see. It's probably moving about the same speed as those other cells. That's typically how it works. So let's see. We'll pin it at about 35 miles an hour and see what we can find. So not a ton of towns, but you know, this is the basic path of it for the next hour or so. And again, you're looking at hail here more than anything. There's nothing tornadic about this system at this time. We'll continue to keep an eye on it. And man, yeah, this thing really made a comeback. This couplet made a bit of a comeback here at the end. I'm going to shorten the loop, save that. Hail tracker did the same. It kind of tailed off there for a second, and then it came back around. So it wasn't quite ready to die out yet. Excuse me while I drink water. So this is the hail tracker that we're watching here. Again, is not precise. It tends to overestimate the size of the hail. But it gives you a good idea that there was a hail tail kind of coming through here. Storm tried to die down for a little bit, and then it's kind of getting a second wind here as far as hail goes, as far as the velocity couplet goes as well. So this is going to be valid till 5, and I'm going to find out, are we going to just keep rolling till 5? Yeah, okay. You're testing my abilities to talk about tornadoes.
Here's the text. I don't know if you already talked about this, but this is the text for the new one. Yeah, so and again, we don't have any, we just don't have any eyes on it, so it's very tough to say what's happening, essentially. Get a drone out there and see what's going on, but so here's your couplet. It does look better now, I will say. So you're looking for that rotation here. The tornado would sit here-ish. And moving off to the north and east about 35 miles an hour or so. So now at some point we're going to run this into a town where we can get some better eyes on it, and I think that will be really helpful for the National Weather Service as to whether or not there's a tornado on the ground or it is mid-level rotation that we're catching and we're just having a hard time deciphering it. So when you look at this scan here, again, you know, from a distance, the storm doesn't jump out at you. It's really all velocity data that shows you that potential couplet more than anything. Because from here, from where we stand, so to speak, this doesn't look terrible, but the velocity data looks a little bit more serious. So that's what we're going to go with. And there's that cell there that came out of Canada and was warned, as we predicted that it would be. And then there's a whole bunch of thunderstorm activity back to the west. Now again, we're actually not in a severe thunderstorm watch. You can have the warning without the watch, and that's what's happening here. They've boxed this area because it's such a big area of thunderstorms, and these are kind of sneaking over the top. And frankly, you know, when they put out these watch box, they do think about population too. So they're not going to box, you know, this big part of Maine when really it's northern Maine and the mountains that are dealing with it right now, the possibility of these storms coming through there. So we'll see. Well, yeah, that looks good now. That looks pretty good now. That couplet, we talked earlier about how a good-looking couplet has almost a circular shape to it, where in this particular area you'd have the green on the southwest side and the red on the northeast side, and that's pretty close to what I was talking about. Now, when they get really wrapped, they can almost get to look like hands that are holding each other, but we're not quite there. But that definitely has a better circular look to it than it did before, and it has more of a look of rotation more solidly than it did before. In fact, in a second here, I'll check the correlation coefficient and see if something's on the ground, it should eventually throw branches, hopefully not entire trees, up into the atmosphere to the point where we can see it. Now, the only thing about correlation coefficient in Maine is it typically takes a little bit more violent of a tornado than we tend to produce, which obviously is good news for us. But sometimes the lower end tornado, EF0, EF1, which is mainly where Maine lives as far as tornadoes, they don't centrifuge debris like that. They don't tend to throw things as high in the atmosphere. So sometimes you can definitely have a tornado on the ground without a correlation coefficient or debris ball. So it is by no means a must-have when you talk about if a tornado is on the ground. But sometimes it can be helpful, and it can help you in a situation like this where you don't have any spotters in the area. So we'll check over to the correlation coefficient, which again I think we've named debris on this radar. Same idea. Correlation coefficient. So this is a very messy product if you don't know what you're looking at, but yeah, I mean, nothing really too that jumps out at me. You typically are looking for like a ball, not. See how this is moving? There's a little bit of a kind of a line off to the northwest. That's not consistent with any kind of debris ball situation. So really, our best look at this storm continues to be the velocity data, because the radar, the reflectivity doesn't look that impressive, but the velocity looks good. So there's your yeah, I'm just looking at this storm because that's pretty meaty there. Ton of lightning with this thing. So this is the severe thunderstorm warned system, quite a bit north of Jackman. And if we query that, we were getting some good strikes before, because
said potential for downburst winds with that Jackman.
with this one, okay. So Jess was saying the National Weather Service is watching for downbursts with this as well. So non-tornadic winds. But I'm trying to select this real quickly and see how much lightning we have. But it looks pretty healthy as far as that goes. And again, lightning is not a severe thunderstorm characteristic technically, but it's something you still don't want to get hit by. So let's check that. Actually, let's check the velocity on that severe thunderstorm warning. See if there's any strong signatures. Yeah, so okay. So we talk about the couplet as far as tornadoes. Well, this is the severe warned system that is not currently being considered tornadic, and it shouldn't be, but this is showing you something too, which is if this is wind toward the radar, well, that's wind really fast towards the radar. And so it can tell you that the wind speeds are very much increased under this cell. And that's where we get the idea of the possibility of those downbursts, those very strong straight line winds, is because the radar is telling us that the winds here are on the high end of this scale. And so you can use this velocity product for a number of things. Tornadoes are the most notable, but you also have the ability to look inside the storm and say the winds are really howling up there, and if just some of them get down to the surface, you'll be at 60 miles an hour easily. And so this went through 201 here, which I mentioned before. It's not 95, but people. And actually, this is something I hadn't even thought about. I guess not as many people are crossing as once would be up through here towards Quebec City, but typically this would be, if you've driven through here, this is pretty high terrain, and so you've got winds coming down strong, you've got hail, and you've got a ton of lightning with this particular system right now. We should put the hail tracker on that, actually. Thank you. We should put the hail tracker on that and see if we've got anything going on it. So we're trying to get reports. I talked about that before because we do not have eyes on the storm. But if you are in the vicinity and can do this safely, take a picture or any kind of video, we do have a Near Me section on our app. So if you download our app, and that gives you the ability to send them right to us. So that would be super helpful. Let us know what's happening on the Near Me section, or also inform the National Weather Service if you see something that looks like a tornado. We work together, so if you send it to us, we will tell them. But yeah, okay, so that hail tracker, I mean, and that cell coming out of Canada, north of Jackman, that's pretty good. That's pretty good size hail. Now again, the hail tracker gets a little excited. Sometimes it'll throw a hail of 2 inches, which does not happen very often in Maine. But it gives you an idea that there's hail that I would say it is likely in excess of a ½ inch coming through with that cell. So that's not great for cars and stuff like that. And so I'm talking. Sorry, the weather team we talked during this stuff. So this is where we're at, and this is again is going to be valid until 5 o'clock, and we typically try to stay on the air with these tornado warning systems until they expire. Now they do, National Weather Service does have the option to cut this short if they decide they want to, but I think they're in a weird spot because they're not getting eyes on it, and so they can't say this is spinning up in the atmosphere and therefore it's unnecessary to continue this warning, and they're not getting eyes to say the opposite, which is this is actually on the ground and we need to continue this. So they're going to be in safety mode, and that's the main goal of National Weather Service as well as us, which is to be safe when it comes to tornadoes. We'd rather have a false alarm, obviously, than have anybody caught off guard by a tornado. Chances are, and this is, you take it very seriously if you're in the path, you go in the basement, inside of your house, whatever the case may be, I will tell you that typically, we don't spin really violent tornadoes here. So that's the good news. There's a reason that you've chosen to live here instead of maybe Oklahoma or Kansas. We don't get the same dynamics to get these storms really, really firing. So I would almost say, the tornado warning is obviously the first priority, but this cell here is a very strong second because it is a good-looking cell with a lot of hail potential. And we're going to put a little tracker on it. It's going about 30 to 35 miles an hour. I'm going to just put it last 15 minutes. It's got more of an east trajectory than northeast, but we can put the tracking product on it here and just see where it's going. Let's go a little further because that cell's going to live more than 20 minutes. Okay, so northeast Cary 507, that's on the edge of it. It's not picking up a ton of towns in between, which sometimes is a function of the program more than anything, to be honest with you. But if we draw this, let's just draw this a little wider. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay, 1 second. It's the fun of the live television. All right, let's go back to this. We're just going to query this in here and loop it. 15 minutes moving due east about 30 or 35 miles an hour. So I'm just trying to see, getting some messages of people, and some of them are potential reports, so I'm trying to figure out what's what here. Of course, as we're live. This is in Canada. A guy is tweeting about a tornado, and I'm trying to see where he's located. It was 30 minutes ago, so that would probably be a different cell. Most likely, where is this man located? Okay, so that's in Quebec County. I'm going to forward this to the rest of the team. Certainly there's possibility that that's legit. And this is what happens. We try to get reports. We try to figure out what exactly is happening with these cells. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So this was the cell. Oh, they warned this one too, huh? That happened quickly. Okay, let's go back over there. All right.
Here it is.
So we got another tornado warning just on the cell we were just watching. So that was good timing, I suppose. We were just talking about the hail on this. We put the hail tracker on it. Let's check the velocity. We're going to come off our old cell, come onto this cell. Might get a better scan down there, hopefully. Not really. Okay. So they've tornado warned this. Let me just query that and see when it's valid to. It's going to be probably 5, I would think. 5:15. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to see what they're saying about this. Doesn't have amazing scan on it for what you're seeing. Tornado warning, obviously northwest Somerset County. 12 miles north of Jackman, moving east at 25 now. Tornado possible and ping pong size hail. We talked about the hail there for a while. It's definitely putting down big hail. As far as the tornado aspect of it, it's a little bit hard to tell in this scan because what I'm getting is that we've got strong straight line winds, but it's a little bit hard to see whether or not we're getting rotation within that. I'm not seeing an opposite scan here that would jump out at me, but we certainly have strong straight line winds there coming out of it.
Yeah, that's all.
That's it. Yeah. So my guess is what's going on here is that they're warning this based on the conditions. So what I mean by that is they're not getting a better scan of this than we are, the National Weather Service that issues these tornado warnings. So they're not, but they're just, I think, implying that we've definitely got strong winds coming down towards the radar here. And even though we've got a bit of a hole because of the terrain, they're going to say that because of the conditions in the storm that already was rotating, that this one could be rotating on the south side. So that's kind of where it comes from. Is it's not a clean scan, but they're filling in the blanks based on the data that we have and based on the limitation of the data that we have right now, which again it has a lot to do with terrain and the distance from the radar. So if this were, down into Lewiston or Auburn or Bangor, we'd have a much better, cleaner scan, unfortunately, of this system than we do. Hail tracker's enormous for down there, though. It thinks it's putting down big hail. Ping pong size hail is big hail. If that verifies from the National Weather Service, then that's a car denter for sure. Hail tracker thinks about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, which is bigger than that, than the National Weather Service has indicated, but that's pretty typical that this hail tracker will overshoot compared to what ends up hitting the ground. It is just an algorithm there. I'm going to widen the radar up because that one popped up and we watched it turn into a tornado warning system and see if there's any more that are feeling feisty out there. There's not a ton behind it, which is probably good. That's just radar showers. That's no big deal. Yeah, that cell's the best one in the state right now. It's looking good. North of Jackman, they said 12 miles. It's moved a bit since then, but roughly. Did that tornado look like something that was coming out of? We're looking at this Twitter. Someone posted a video from Canada of looked like a weak tornado, but it's hard to figure out where exactly it was coming from. The internet, believe it or not, guys, not always super reliable. So we try to vet any pictures that we get from the interwebs because sometimes they're from a tornado 4 years ago, and someone thinks it's funny to post it. But this is a tornado, and I have to admit my French teacher would not be happy because I'm having trouble deciphering the French here. I'm reading that it's tornado. I'm trying to figure out where it is. This was about 30 minutes ago. The reason that I'm interested in that is because if it's this cell here that came across the border, that would be a big part of the reason that they would warn it. If they know it already produced a tornado, then they're going to warn it. obviously, as it continues eastward here. So that cell, I think, is taken over as the main risk here. And to the north, these cells, this cell is still tornado warned, not to downplay that. It doesn't look as feisty. It kind of went through another regression cycle here. Had a really good couplet at the beginning of that re-warning, and now it's coming down a bit. But it's cycled a few times, so the tornado wind continues as it moves off to the northeast, about 30 to 35 miles an hour. Take a look at the wider radar picture. So we could be in for a busy night here because these storms are not really showing too much signs of dying down, and in fact, the storms that are out ahead of it maybe look a little bit stronger. Severe storms coming through central parts of Vermont too. So, and then there's this whole dead zone, most of the state, where there isn't a whole lot going on. So we're just kind of skirting these on the north side with the severe storms, and they're coming up over that warm front zone, and sometimes these warm fronts are like that, where they just start spinning everything that comes through. And often it happens down here, but today it's here. We'll take another look at that velocity scan here shortly. I think we might. might. So we're for those of you watching at home, we're sending out the bat signal now for other meteorologists. So because it might turn into a bit of a busy night. Turns out. So there, that cell right there is.
He's already on his way.
All right, so Ryan's on his way. That's good. I'm going to go back to that scan and just look at that one again, because I think that one is just looking like the better storm right now. Man, I wish we had some better scans there, though. It's just not good. Jess, did you try? Can we do different tilts on Max? I'm just wondering if there's any way to see this storm better. I mean, it's just.
Are you using the one site?
I think I'm using a single site, yeah. Do you want to go to the composite? Because what we're seeing here is, and this is like really, this is the technology we're in here. I'm gonna check. I have a radar here too. No, we're good. I'm just trying to see if so there's different tilts. Yeah, there is a better scan than this to get. So is that, are we pulling, can we pull out a GYX? I think that's the problem. Like, I'm getting a better scan from gray than I am from the other one.
Okay, hang on one sec. I'm just gonna make a quick adjust.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do, guys, is we're just not seeing this storm very well, and I think we're gonna get a better scan from gray than we are way off to the east here. So even though this is technically closer to this radar station, I think gray is going to get us a better scan. Oh, should I have a severe show?
Okay, perfect. Can you help us find the radar one site for this show? Yeah. Because I can't find it. He's on it.
Ryan, that was quick. What do you?
That was amazing.
Were you in the parking lot? So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to see, Ryan, if we can switch to gray, because I'm getting a bad velocity scan on this off the other radar.
I think the Jackman storm is in the WCSH out.
Okay, so we're continuing to watch this storm. Again, it's radar indicated, hail size 1.5. That's probably a little bit generous, but there's definitely some good size hail coming out of it. You can tell just by the reflectivity. We're trying to get a slightly better velocity scan on it if we can from the south, because I can tell you that when I'm able to get the velocity scan from the south on a different platform, I'm seeing more of that couplet, because when we're sampling it from the side, all we're seeing is these strong winds that are coming towards the radar, but we're not getting a good look at it from the other side. But if you do, there is actually some couplet action going on in here as well. And so we're looking at the radar to the east of us right now. The one in gray is also scanning from the south. It's just going to be at a high elevation because we're so far away. So we've got layers here. Obviously, the severe thunderstorm warning was first, and that had to do with the hail and the straight line wind potential. And then they added the tornado warning, which is valid until 5:15. This storm is in the ballpark of 20 miles to the northeast of Jackman. That's the best identifier we can give. As you know, it's not a super populated area here, and that's part of the problem that we're having, is just not able to get a ton of eyes on these storms as to what's happening. And that's why we're trying to verify these online reports out of Canada to see if they're related here. So there we go, that progressing that forward to the east about 30 miles an hour or so. And those are the towns that it's going to come through. Let's check out the other one again and just see what's going on with it. This was their original storm that they've warned a couple of times, or extended the warning a couple of times as it crossed into Aroostook County here. So on the reflectivity, it doesn't look like anything special. The lightning is much lower. The hail is probably smaller than the other cell that we're seeing. But what this storm had a few times, is a couplet that came together for a couple of scans, and it looked pretty good. And so that's why it's still warned. And so now we're getting into a few more towns at least going forward. Ashland at 5 p.m. I think the path of this is a little bit more northeast, and so we're probably going to miss some of these towns to our south, but we are looking, I think Ashland is a good one around 5 o'clock, assuming it's moving about 30 to 35 miles an hour or so. And this is still radar indicated, it is worth noting, and it usually is in Maine. Very rarely do we get a situation where it is something that we can confirm for sure. And so we talked a little bit about this before, but what to do if you have a tornado warning. The good news is now cell phone towers ping your phone, and you almost can't miss it. It just overrides anything else that's going on your phone. But lowest level of building, a lot of Maine homes obviously have basements, so that's your best bet in that situation. If you don't have one, interior room, bathrooms are a popular one. They tend to be a little bit more interior, have fewer windows. So obviously staying away from windows, doors, outside walls, being outside in general, not a great play here unless you know you're far enough away. And pillows and blankets and all that, and not to downplay that. Again, we don't tend to produce a ton of super violent tornadoes here, so that's the good news. That's why we sometimes call them spin-ups, like they're a weaker type tornado. This still obviously has some hail to it as it's moving off to the east. It's kind of see what it's doing on the south side as far as whether or not we've got any additional rotation within this. Let's see, so 5:15. Just check the velocity real quick on it. I just wanted to see if we were getting a better scan on that. And also I need to drink water, so there's that. At least I have my New Center Maine logoed water bottle this time. Okay, so there are your two cells. Again, this one is starting to me to look like the better storm. So we talked about, man, this must have been almost an hour ago. We started talking about how when storms start moving into a certain air mass, then they just all start spinning, and you'll see this out towards Sebago Lake most commonly in Maine. That's the area we pin as this being a common thing. But this is on the side of the warm front like this. These storms now are just in a mode where they're more prone to rotation. So all these that come out, anything else that comes out of Canada, we're going to have to watch. Good news is it looks like there's a little bit of a lull. If we pull back further, I don't know if there's a whole lot going on here. There's a whole lot going on, but it's pretty far west right now. So this is the cold front here. So warm front is nose through, hot, humid, nothing going on here in the warm sector really. It's on the warm front, and then the cold front was originally what the Storm Prediction Center actually had highlighted as the higher risk zone here today was going to be the cold front. And certainly spatially that's turning out to be true, but in our neck of the woods, it's the warm front nosing through that's causing us some trouble right now. And especially just north of that warm front is kind of the classic spot we'll start to see these spin up a bit. And so we're looking, rotation tracks, I think we talked a little earlier about is a cleaner way to look at that velocity data that we show you with the red and the green. So this is just a little bit simpler way of looking at it. And so it's indicating that it thinks there's still some rotation in this storm, and there was a track of rotation. And you'd see within that there was a few places where it broke up. And so at those moments, the algorithm didn't feel that it was as strong, that the tornado looked as strong. Here's the hail tracker, which shows you a similar path of that storm. It's pretty long-lived. Now this one, Canada, coming out of Canada, has had a really big hail potential, I think, for this neck of the woods. There's some good-sized hail that's trying to come out of here. Now, again, the hail tracker, you know, it's a little aggressive typically, but say if it's half that size, it's still severe hail. So that's one way to look at it. But 1.6, 1.5, I mean, it's big hail. They were saying ping pong size, I believe, in the warning. So that's good enough size hail to cause some damage as it comes through. Here's a look progressing it off to the east. So these are some of the towns that we're looking at. I got to admit, I'm not super familiar with them, but don't hold it against me. You can only know so many towns at any given time. Northeast Cary, that's 515. And again, this is progressing east. And it looks like it's going over a lake here. And that's always dangerous when these go over bodies of water on a hot day. It's always something that you'd look out for because it can be very dangerous. And even if the couplet isn't looking good, just a bunch of straight line wind and hail, if you're out on a boat or worse, a canoe or something, it can be really dangerous. That's probably our biggest threat with this particular storm, because this is not very populated, but as it comes through the northern side here and gets over some bodies of water, that's when you start talking about having some problems, which of course, again, to go back to kind of the Sebago example, is something that they deal with quite a bit, and they're generally pretty aware of it. So those are the two cells. This one is, that one's valid at 515, and this one I believe is 515 as well in the north, that north one. That velocity scan is just hard to look at though. It's just, you're kind of seeing one side of this equation, unfortunately, because of the terrain and where that radar is coming from. We're just not getting a very clean picture of it. We're on the edge of it. But Ryan has drawn in these arrows, which would show you roughly what we're thinking as far as rotation, because the radar is over here, and then we're seeing, assuming that there's some that's going away from it as well. You're just not seeing that quite as well on the velocity scans. And we were trying to pick up whether or not the stuff coming out of Canada was legitimately happening today as a tornado. Certainly seems possible. Let's go back to the other one, Ryan. The one to the north into Aroostook County has, at least on this radar, has a slightly better couplet going on. On this tool here, it looks pretty good. So there it is. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's not symmetrical. It's not perfect, of course, but it's got still the look where there could be some rotation going on. The challenge, as we talked about throughout this afternoon, is where in the atmosphere, where in the storm is it sampling? Is it up just a little bit on this tilt because of the mountains? And is it showing the mid-level rotation? But this is, on the way here to a couple of towns as it moves to the east. Oxbow Plantation would be the one that I would know at 504, Blackwater 521, if it can hold itself together. And it's valid till 515, the tornado warning. So they'll have to make a decision. They'll make a decision whether or not they're going to extend this, probably within the next 7 or 8 minutes. And if they do, it'll be clean out into further into central Aroostook County here. So I was trying to look at the correlation coefficient before, Ryan, but there's not much there. I mean, it would take a pretty violent tornado, I think, to kick something up. Yeah. I mean, it's
weird, but I don't think it's a debris.
No, yeah, it's too elongated.
It's like hail is messing with
It's the hail. I think it's a hail spike. Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit before, how if you're looking for a debris signature, it's more like a ball typically, and it doesn't show up for super long. This here, as Ryan was saying, and we talked about maybe a half hour ago, is probably what's happening is this product is telling you the different size objects in the storm, and well, some of those objects could be hail and big hail, and so it's probably sensing big hail here, and it's thinking that it's behind it as well. So it happens when we talked about the hail spike with the radar. It's a similar phenomenon to that. So probably nothing. And again, honestly, I don't know, Ryan. Have you ever seen a real debris ball with a tornado here? Even the ones that were back. Like it's not common. Luckily, yeah. Because you really typically you need like a good. I guess you could do it with an EF2, but usually you're not going to do it with a low-end tornado. So it's good because remember what we're talking about here when we talk about a debris ball is we're seeing things thrown into the air by a tornado. So whether they be trees or sometimes building materials, and so you don't want to see that, but it is something that's worth checking if a tornado could be on the ground. It gives you a very strong indication if that's the case. So we're still in the radar indicated portion of this, and the challenge, of course, and I'm going to walk over and see if there's anything in chat, is we're just not getting many reports out of here. We just don't have eyes on it.
Yeah, this warning had a population of very few people.
Yeah, so
there's been nothing so far from it, but it's starting to move toward like this is. Let's see, if we make this highways, this is Route 11.
Right, presumably, like I don't know how many people live in Ashland off the
Right.
top of my head. Presumably, we can get a few eyes on it as it comes through here because we've really been kind of in no man's land
Right.
as far as reports go, and that'll go a long way for the National Weather Service. Okay, both warnings expire at 15 past the hour. So at this time, it looks like they're going to hold on these current warnings, but they're not indicating at the moment that they're going to issue them.
They updated the Jackman one about 5 minutes
Trimmed
ago.
it up.
Said it would be until 5:15.
Okay, 5:15.
But even that one is in a pretty rural area. This is Moosehead Lake.
Right.
There's Greenville, so this would be the north side of Moosehead Lake.
And that's what we were talking about. Like, that's really the only danger I see with this particular storm is if it goes over Moosehead Lake and there's people out there.
Right.
That's when things get a little dangerous, because there's not a lot of town population centers in there. So there's your tornado warning there. Okay, I don't know that lake.
I don't either.
I'm willing to take a chance at saying it wrong on TV. Maybe I'm not actually. I don't know that one. I got to be honest, but if it's wrong, I'm sure you'll email me. But it's going right over that, though. Yeah, I'm just not familiar with that lake.
There it is, 5:10 p.m. So.
Okay, so Seboomic.
Seboomic?
That sounds right.
Yeah,
Seboomic
sounds
Lake. Obviously, Moosehead is that's that one a little bit easier. But yeah, the north side, So if people out on the water, that's what it does get dangerous because you're presumably not looking at radar and you probably have a decent line of sight. I'm not sure. I mean, you get some mountains here, so it might be creeping right over there. The hail tracker is going bananas. 2.1. That's
The warning is for an inch and a half. We've seen
inch and a half.
reasonable.
Okay, yeah.
Big hail.
It seems like you can usually trim the hail tracker down like 25% or something, roughly. So it actually, Ryan, animate this for a second. Is it going to clip Moosehead or is it going to go just north of there? Just want to see. It's going to be close. Yeah. It's going to be close. All right, we still got a lot more storms back here to see what comes into the atmosphere. The severe watches, they're not in Maine because again, it's not a big part of the state that's being impacted right now. So they're not going to hoist a watch of that size. It would be like a little sliver here. So unlikely to do that. But this is valid till 9 o'clock to our west, and it just gives you an idea of what's kind of coming upstream here with this cold front, which is a whole bunch of thunderstorms. Now, if at a different time of the year, earlier in the season, you'd say, well, it's 5 o'clock. They're not even fully through the Champlain Valley. We might not get them in here in time. And there's still a little bit of that, but, the sun sets, 8:30 or so tonight. So we've got time to get them over here intact. So we'll see if we do that. Right now, though, what we've been dealing with is on the warm front side. Just to the north of the warm front is where we've seen spinning around. So these are they don't have much room that they have to go down to produce a tornado between the terrain and the fact that the cloud base is probably relatively low today. The dew point's high, so you're probably looking at a relatively low cloud level. So you don't have a lot of span to make up, if that makes sense, between the cloud and the ground, and that matters because sometimes you see them more elevated.
Extended this one for Aroostook until 5:45.
Okay, so they went forward with this one. All right, so they're going to keep this one going until 5:45. In which case, Ryan, you may get a microphone in a minute, so I can drink some water. This is so. All right, we're going to track this one. They kept this one going. Yeah, you have to think that that's because they just don't know. They just haven't got a good look at it. Okay, so here we go. Ashland we talked about before. Castle Hill. That's 518. Mapleton is 526. Presque Isle, obviously, is your big ticket one here at 538 if it survives. Now, technically, the warning takes us till that time, so it is possible that it survives that. And on its current trajectory, I would say that it probably would actually go through there. So that's clearly worth watching. I think this is going to be really important here in the next, whatever it may be, 10 or 15 minutes. If we can get this through, what is this, like a Route 11 here? And again, I don't know how big Ashland is, but it would be really helpful to get some eyes on this as it comes through. And there's Ryan's drawing in the speed that the radar thinks the wind is going towards and away from the radar, and so that's showing you that it's trying to complete a circle here or a rotation within the storm, which has been doing off and on this cell since we went on, which was about 3:45 or so. The same cell has been kicking around. So this is quite a few warnings for one cell, for Maine at least, relatively long track. We just don't know what it's doing, if it's putting down an actual tornado or it's just being warned that way. So again, this is moving to the north and east. It looks to me, Ryan, like it's going to miss Ashland itself, but again, I don't know. Just trying to see what the layout is there, whether or not we can get some eyes on it. Okay, Ashland. Just trying to see, because this is, and again, we've talked about we don't want, it says 1,300 people, so that could go either way. We want eyes on it. We don't want anyone to get hurt. I talked before about if you have pictures of these cells and you can get them safely, to send us those on the Near Me section of our app. It's pretty easy to do, and we will also relay anything we get from you to the National Weather Service, and they relay what they get as well. So it's a cooperative effort. We just make it pretty easy to upload them. So if you have our app, you see something, you can just upload it directly, and that helps us out a lot, to be honest with you, because in a situation like this, you can only stare at the radar for so long before you kind of have to know what's going on. Is it will look like on the ground truth, so to speak. So that storm, again, going through Ashland, which apparently has about 1,500 people or so. So maybe we'll
bring up the webcam.
Okay.
See if you can see anything. This is looking north.
Trying to get.
Close up.
We'll get there.
There we go.
Oh,
Pretty
it's so hazy.
You can see it.
It's so hazy. Yeah. Where's that drone when we need it? See, this is it. This is what we needed the drone for. We'll send it right up there, see what's going on. So we were trying to get eyes on it the best we could, but it's so warm and hazy that your visibility is pretty low. It did look like some of those tornado reports we were getting in Canada seemed to be possibly legit, but they were coming out of the Montreal area, so not Quebec City. Dew points are very high, and that's so when we talked about being hazy with the dew points near 70, super juicy out there. That's part of that warm front that's nosing through, and so that makes it a little bit easier. One, the cloud level's lower, and it makes it a little easier to get these get a possible tornado to the ground if we're rotating at the right level. So those are the two tornado warn systems. Those will be this one's valid till 5:45. Are they potentially letting this one expire? I guess we got 12 minutes left on that.
This one is 5:15. Jackson is
5:15 on that one. And what is that? Of course, our
5:15.
scan
And the
isn't
other one
great
is
there anyways.
5:45.
Yeah. So
Let's That's again, we'll put a track on this because this is the first
It's our best
real
chance here.
population
Yeah.
center that it's made it into. So Ashland, for example, Aroostook County. Pretty much in the next couple of minutes, you can hear the thunder, see the lightning there, and you're going to get some hail. This is all pretty big hail just west of Ashland, and that's moving in. Now the possible tornado, as Keith noted, is more just to the south of Ashland, and then this here is Route 11, so it's approaching Route 11 probably in the next 10 minutes or so, the potential tornado. So if you know anybody in Ashland, Aroostook County, west of Presque Isle, give them a call. Make sure they're inside. They definitely can hear the thunder at this point, and it's just starting to rain, but the real core of the storm is probably about 10 minutes away from Route 11 and 10 minutes away from Ashland. And then after that, if it holds together in about 30 to 45 minutes, if it holds together, which so far it's held up pretty well, it would get into more significant population around Presque Isle too.
Right. Yeah, and that would be, of course. I'd hope we'd know by the time it gets to Presque Isle whether or not
Right.
we've got something. And to be clear on this too, like it's not like if a spotter doesn't see anything that they cancel it automatically.
Correct.
But it's just that we've been
Yeah,
blind.
there's a certain
You know.
threshold, and it's right on that line where it's too risky to not have a warning on it. You can clearly see these two colors right here, and that's the rotation indicated by radar. And if it's strong enough, they have a certain level that they keep a warning up. So that's why it's been going now for an hour or more,
Right.
hour and 20 minutes.
Safety, right? That's what it comes down to. But it would definitely help them if it comes across and people in Ashland see it and they say there's nothing on the ground. And it's also a possibility that it's hail and rain enough that they can't see anything. So that's also a problem sometimes in the Northeast is visibility is minimal with these storms. Excuse me. All right, so
Check on the other one?
what's that?
Want to check on the other
Let's
one?
check on it. Let's see how it's doing.
Let's see. So this is really for the north side of the Moosehead Lake region.
So yeah, and
Very isolated.
the what was that lake called? That one there, Sibuic.
Yep.
Yes,
Try to get that plotted on
Sib-
there. There you go.
Subumic. Okay, so it's like raking right across that lake, and it looks like it should sail to the north of the northern part of Moosehead here, which is good, and probably will just clear it because that's a bad situation if you have a strong severe storm coming right over like that. And again, I'm not familiar with the north side of Moosehead in the sense that if you're blind to it, some lakes you're blind to approaching storms because of the terrain. And that's a bad situation. So those are your two main cells. In Canada, that'll be way north. We talked about safety. Again, we don't anticipate that this is a super violent tornado, but you definitely want to be inside. So if you've got a basement, that's your number one place to go. If you're on a slab or it's a mobile home type situation, then just inside room. You're just trying to get away from any possible debris that would get through the windows and whatnot. So again, we're trying to gather as much information as we can. I mentioned before that we have on our app, we have a Near Me section where you can send us pictures and videos, but I don't, and it's pretty easy to do, and then we share it with the National Weather Service. I don't get the sense there's a ton of people that have had their eyes on it so far. So we'll watch this and see if anybody in Ashland sees anything. And we don't want you to go out and try to find it, to be clear on this.
This definitely is the more concerning storm at the moment.
This one here,
Right into
yeah.
Ashland.
Right. This one at least it's definitely near more people. And so we found an Ashland population about 1,500.
See the hook right here.
So it's sitting here. It should go south of Ashland. I don't know the setup of the town enough to know what the population looks like down here. But that storm, as Ryan noted, definitely the more population intensive storm right now, as it's going to pass just to the south of Ashland. And it at least is indicated to have some rotation that could be producing a tornado here. The hail also still pretty good on the north side of it. But the tornadoes typically sit on the south side of a hook. And, it's not always textbook. Textbook is like this. That's not exactly what we're seeing, but you rarely see it quite like that. But there does seem to be a couplet in here. Winds here here. You can see the towards and away as Ryan just sent. And so this will be, yeah, I think as it comes through, you have to be aware of the fact that there could be a tornado here. Even if it's a low-end tornado, it could cause some damage as it moves eastward here. So that cell, and then eventually if that survives, you know, Presque Isle is eventually in play if it's able to thread the needle through here and stay alive. And the thing about, you know, this time of the day with the dew points and the dynamics we have, they're obviously surviving pretty well. They're not exactly pulsing up and down immediately as some storms sometimes do. So that's not happening right now. Again, if we kind of put a tracker on this, Presque Isle would be about 550, 555 if it can make it there.
That's from the tornado.
From the center of the tornado, yep. Yeah, so you've got, right, to the north of that, you're still going to have hail shaft possibilities. We're trying to track it off the tornado, where the tornado would sit, to give you a better idea of where that threat would be. So we don't have anything in chat, I would assume. We're just kind of moving forward and seeing what cooks out of that storm.
Which one? Sorry.
Oh no, I was just talking about that Ashland one.
Oh,
we
okay.
won't
So,
really know much more until it comes
No,
through.
there's been no update from chat, but now it's going right in there.
Yeah.
And this is a good opportunity to just remind people, if you have pictures or video of any storms, you can always send them in to us. The Near Me section of the app was great on Saturday when we had those storms. And if you've got friends or family in Ashland, now's the time to call them and say, hey, you know, you got to get in the basement. This is probably the first legitimate town that's been hit. You know, a couple of townships, little communities, but
Right. Yeah. And like I said, the good news is nowadays the way that they, oh, that's not my phone, I'm sorry. That's not my phone either.
mine. Sorry.
The way they warn these, it's almost hard to ignore now, which is good, because of the way they ping off cell phones and whatnot based on your position. So rotation track is a distilled way of looking at the red and the green that we showed you before. So this is showing you that track is still there. And so now we're, again, waiting to see as it goes through kind of the south side of Ashland whether or not there is something on the ground there. And I'm going to guess that we'll hopefully get some sort of report out of there, whether it be hail or rotation that's occurring. Yeah, so it's right about here. And to be clear, when I say south side of Ashland, Ashland itself will get hail and heavy rain and wind probably, but the tornado itself is going to want to sit south of there. So this has been a long track. This has been a pretty long track storm. So it's shown resiliency. It's shown a tendency to want to spin at the mid levels, at least, potentially the lower levels of the atmosphere. And so all of those things are going to lead them to continue to warn this system until the radar or spotters show them otherwise. That's kind of where we're at as far as the protection mode of this particular situation. Tornado warning still going on. So that storm there, and then the other one was skirting just to the north of Moosehead, and yeah.
There's definitely
Yeah.
some hail in this.
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
There was more significant hail before.
It was looking good.
We'll check
though.
the velocity on it. It's not as impressive.
Yeah, and that's such a bad spot.
It's in a bad radar
Yeah.
spot for sure. That doesn't
How
help.
dare it be in the
Yeah.
wrong radar spot?
But another thing to mention is if you're around these storms and you can hear thunder, you're always close enough to be struck by lightning. So, you know, that's why there's this saying, when thunder roars, go indoors, you know. This is big boating time of year, so there are definitely people up here, although it is rural and not well populated. And we should note that these are the only 2 warnings. Looks like the Weather Service in Caribou just updated this one, keeping it until 5:45.
Yeah, it doesn't. You know, even from the south, that one you can't quite make it out. I got the weirdest correction. Population of Ashland is 1,200, not 1,500. If that's the biggest mistake I make today, I'm very happy with that.
I think so too.
I can
Yeah.
live with that.
You want to show maybe a timeline just through the night?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
people
it's
can
doing-
kinda do a little forecast.
How is it doing? It was initializing okay originally. I don't know. I don't know how it's doing now, as far as where the storms were. Oh yeah, all right. So yeah, so Ryan's talking about trying to project this forward, and we talked about how models have a hard time with individual pop-up thunderstorms. But the idea is that that line that's back to our west is there, right? It's depicted. So as we go forward in time, it's going to try to crash into the mountains here sometime a little bit before or after sunset, depending on your location. And so this model kind of crunches them and kills them pretty quickly at that point, and then it watches the secondary line try to come through and try to work its way into Oxford County, kind of in the middle of the night. But whether or not those storms in that first line die out that quickly, that's going to be the real key to this forecast, because the dynamics are proving to be relatively supportive right now of storms. So if that line that's back into Vermont right now can hold together, then we'll be looking at a bunch of them coming in here, Oxford County originally, and then into the mountains all the way through around sunset tonight. So we've kind of got, like I said, the time of the year working for us a bit. Not that you can't have severe storms after sunset. You absolutely can. But sometimes it's hard to get them into Maine through the middle of the night. So there's that line that's being depicted on the radar. Now, one of the other fun radar holes that we have is Northeast Kingdom. Okay, so they killed that one. Okay. So that's good. I mean, it was always kind of hard to see that one anyways, right? Yeah, that one's still probably putting down some sneaky hail, but as far as it being tornado, so this is the last one. It's coming. It should be coming through Ashland right about now, right, or close to it. Population 1,200 in Ashland. Yep. So I mean that's so down here, if it's there, and then the hail core is up here. So this is a whole other conversation that we only have time for because we've been on for a while. So you see how that hail core was to the north here, and that's pretty typical. And so there's a whole business now of storm chasing, tornado chasing, and one of the things that they try to avoid is they call it core punching. So they come from the north, and the reason for that is when they're pursuing any kind of tornadoes, you can't see much of anything coming through the north side, and then you emerge. So you come through your hail core here, you emerge, and the tornado presumably could be right there. And so it's a really dangerous thing that you'll see people do sometimes. If you can track storm chasers, a lot of them have geo positions, but typically it's a dangerous thing to do for that reason, because the tornado wants to sit down here. If you don't have hail, you have a bunch of heavy precipitation. It's very blinding on the north side. So that's what's going through Ashland, and then if there's a tornado, it's sitting south of that. And so really the only safe place that you would get a look at this storm would be down here. If you're down about here, then you could probably get a look at it. And again, I'm not recommending that if you don't know what you're doing, then just go inside. If you're in the tornado warning, just go inside. But that's the only spot you probably get a clear vantage. I'm guessing the people in Ashland will be able to report if there's hail, but they're going to have probably a hard time seeing south there with that cell coming through. And that's what, as Ryan mentioned before, we do have ways to collect any pictures and videos you get on our app. It's a near me section. And there's the one that they let it spire, north side of Moosehead Lake. Yep, doesn't have. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong max. We got two weather computers. The other one didn't have much couplet left. And there's not a whole lot back into Canada right now that's super concerning. Like there's a couple of nasty ones way up there, but they're not going to be a problem for us. So I was saying before, there's also a weird radar hole. We talked about the radar sampling issues with the cells that we're watching in the mountains. Well, the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont has its own radar hole, so we might not get a good look at those storms when they come out until they come into northern New Hampshire, so north of Berlin. Then we'll see whether or not they're holding together for us. But the nastier storms look like they're down towards Rutland, Rutland actually, I feel like they get some pretty strong storms right through there, still coming through. All right, so we're down to one tornado warning, valid till 5:45. They're probably going to make a decision on that based on if they hear anything out of here. But let's take a look at the velocity and just see if we've got anything that looks good there. And maybe pause it or. So we're looking down here. Yep, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's there. It's certainly not, you're not going to see it in synoptic meteorology textbooks, but or mesoscale meteorology textbooks, but it's here, and there's still rotation, and it's in the correct spot relative to the storm. So all those things are taken into consideration when you talk about if a warning's extended. The couplet makes sense where it's located for a tornado. And at the very least, that this storm is rotating, and it has been for a while. And I don't know, if you've seen this, you probably have at some point. There are thunderstorms that rotate, and you can visibly see them doing that, and they don't always produce tornadoes. Those are a precursor sometimes, but not always. Sometimes they'll rotate and they just never get anything to the ground. That's the best case scenario. Here's your hail tracker here. The hail has diminished a bit. It was really on the heavy side before, and that hail core is kind of going to come through Ashland here while the tornado tries to sit to the south a bit. That's Route 11. Not super familiar with it, but that's obviously leading into Ashland and 163. And the wider picture of this is if it holds together, it will threaten Presque Isle at some point, and that would be just after this would expire if they let it expire. So that's going to be. I would guess, Ryan, that'll make it more likely for them to extend it because they're not going to want to let it roll into Presque Isle or anything without it being warned if they don't know. Yeah, that's. Just want to see. Oh, look, see, as soon as I take over, I've got loading issues. All right, just wanted to see this. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little messy, but I mean, this is our best population center here of the chances through Ashland, so we'll just have to just wait and see what comes of it. It's still there.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is if you know anybody in Ashland, they've got to be inside. I mean, that time already passed. And even if you're in Mapleton or have family in Mapleton, this is about as strong as storms get in that part of the state. So it's definitely a storm to take seriously, and that's why the warning's out.
And that's the main goal, right? Is we talked about just about safety and making sure everybody's indoors when they need to be, and they don't want anybody outside when something comes through like that. And so the scans, the radar, are the tool that help us here. But as far as the reality, I would even like to know, what the hail size is putting down in. But we talked about, Presque Isle being, it's going to be probably more like 550 or so. Ryan's going as far as this warning is in time. But if they don't hear anything definitive out of this area, I would guess that they'll extend it just because they don't want to risk this going into Presque Isle unwarned if they don't know for sure that there's nothing on the ground. And so that's the kind of the psychology of that. Presque Isle, it's about 555. So it's obviously a science in the radar analyzation aspect of it, but there is some consideration as to the population and what the risk is here as this storm comes out. And Ryan's tracking it from where we think the tornado would be sitting. So that is on the south side of it. The hail core going through Ashland right now. Tornado, if there is one, about to pass over, I believe that was Route 11 there, south of Ashland, and on the way to Presque Isle roughly at 555. Although this tracker is pretty good usually, so it would be about 555 if it can hold together. So they're going to wait and see probably if the scans get any better or worse, or if you have any reports. And this is like just a side note. These are turbines. We have turbines on Mars Hills. Yeah, I would assume. Yeah. So we're picking that up too, just as a aside. It's not a tiny thunderstorm that's out there that doesn't move. So let's look to the west a little bit. I'm sorry. I just want to see if there's anything. These don't look quite as good, but we're also on the composite, right? Just trying to see what we've got coming later tonight, if anything. And a couple of these up in Canada are still trying to fire a little bit. Not quite giving up. This one's having a resurgence attempt here. Our old tornado warned. It's so small though. It's got that little
Right.
hail core look to it, but it doesn't look. Let's use this radar instead. It's not covering a lot of space, that's for sure. But when that came out of Canada, I think it was probably putting down good hail.
Definitely,
It was,
yeah.
it was a good looking storm. What we consider good, obviously, is not good, but good as far as its presentation goes. All right through Ashland right now, and as Ryan mentioned, anybody upstream here, Mapleton is probably the next in the path. Then eventually Presque Isle. They should be inside, preferably in a basement, which actually is not a terrible place to be when it's dew point of 70 anyways. So you got that going for you. And then we've just been watching storms upstream because that's where they've been coming from. They've been coming up from Canada. And there's a whole little cluster here, you know. And sometimes when they just come out of here, they just keep doing what their other ones were doing. They keep trying to rotate. All right. So these back here are nothing right now. They're just little showers and thunder showers. But my point is sometimes when things start emerging and they get strong in the same zone just north of the warm front, then anything that comes out of this area needs to be watched because they're in a mode now, if that makes any sense. They're wanting to spin up as they come through here. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see whether or not that continues to be an issue. And in the broader sense, the cold front has not shown, I don't believe they've had any tornado warnings back there. If they have, I missed them. So this line really looks more like it's a straight line wind situation and perhaps some hail. But the cold front looks to be a little bit, and that tends to be the case for us in Maine. I don't remember us getting a ton of tornadic activity along a cold front. So it's a warm front to the north that we watch about. And then if this line comes through, it'll be a different set of threats for a lot of people where we're talking about the straight line winds and the possibility of some hail too. And torrential downpours is also implied in this. There's a ton of moisture available in the atmosphere, which if you've been outside at any point today, you know that. But that's all coming in from the cold front. The warm front and the north side of that, the warm front nose, has been the challenge for us today as far as the tornadoes go. So any of these that come out of Canada, we'll keep an eye on them. Most of them are on a path, the stronger ones seem to be on a path to barely clip Maine. If they do, it might be far northern Aroostook County. And then the ones that come out here, north of Jackman, we'll keep an eye on those and see if they blossom into something stronger. This is the one that is coming now through Ashland. Tornado sits down here. That actually looks a little bit better on on radar there. So there it is, just south of Ashland, around Route 11 right now. So hopefully it is not a tornado because it's going over that road at the moment, over to 163, and then it'll continue off to that east, kind of drifting northeast direction. Mapleton here, I don't know the population of Mapleton. And then maybe Presque Isle, probably, maybe on the north side. Let's see. This is, I could ask Siri, but I don't trust it. Okay, so Mapleton's a little bit bigger, about 2,000 people. So anybody there, or if you know anybody there, they should be seeking shelter now, inside, basement, interior room, whatever the case may be. And as the storm passes here, we might be able to get a better look at it, or people will be able to get a better look at it as it passes to the east, northeast. But it does look like the way that tornado is sitting, which is kind of in this notch here on the south side of it, that it would at least threaten Mapleton and probably Presque Isle, perhaps just on the north side of town. It's always hard to tell. Sometimes these storms wobble a little bit along the way. But the more pronounced that notch is, usually the better chance that you have at least some serious rotation going on there. And that's where the classic hook echo look comes from. And this is not it. I mean, this is not classic, but it's giving you the same look to it that you would see in a more classic one. A hail core to the north, hook in there, and then the tornado sits just south there of Ashland. And we'll see if that is in fact what happened. The velocity data, I believe, looks pretty similar.
Latest scan isn't as
Yeah, that's not
isn't
as good.
tight.
Yeah, it's getting a little diffuse there, which is good. This storm, it might have been, Ryan, when you were thinking about coming in. This storm basically gusted itself out to nothing and then came back.
Might be able to see that here on the
Yeah, there's-
rotation history.
It's a break in there where it just wasn't there, and then
Yeah.
it came back to life, roaring back to life. So obviously trying to keep an eye on that possibility. But I think this is actually an easier way for people typically
Right.
to see it. That
Yeah,
path.
That's the path of the, basically if you just extend this out, this is where the possible tornado has tracked. And if it were to hold together, it would keep going in the general direction of Presque Isle, but that's not a guarantee. The storm definitely is still strong, but whether or not that rotation can hold up is definitely a question. And this looks like it's a pretty good hail core just north of Ashland, headed toward Mapleton, north of Route 163, right around 227. So again, for a while, this storm was not in any populated areas, but now it is in a more populated part. It's not extremely populated. It's still to the west of Route 1, but this definitely is working toward more populated towns. And we'll do another track let's do it from the beginning of the worst of the storm. We'll do it like this. Time's pretty much the same. If it might be some hail in Mapleton in about 10 minutes, about 5:39. So if you live in Mapleton, this hail could be pretty big. It could be, let's see what the warning has it listed as. At least an inch in diameter, but this latest scan, whenever you see these blacks, I mean, it's
pretty
beneath
purpley
that
in there.
lightning strike, yeah, that's really pretty big hail, I would think. Maybe
Yeah.
an inch and a half in diameter, so up to maybe almost the size of a ping pong ball, certainly a little bit bigger than a quarter.
Yep.
And that can be enough to ding cars. So if you're in any of these towns here, Mapleton, Castle Hill, that potential hail core would be working in your direction. So yes, there is still a tornado warning on the storm, but there also is the threat of lightning and hail and heavy rain too. But Keith, I'll be honest, I mean,
That looks pretty decent right there, yeah.
yeah,
It looks good. It's funny. Right now, it looks better on...
the storm structure looks pretty
yes,
good, but the
but
rotation
the scan doesn't look
maybe
good.
is
Yeah.
weakening, which is good. I mean, we
Right.
don't want a tornado.
Right,
But we also don't want to be warning for something that isn't,
right. That is interesting. We had the
enough.
same thought. Like, so if I looked at that radar right there, I'd be like, that looks pretty decent. It's got
Right.
like a little inflow notch and everything, but then the velocity scan is
And sometimes these storms go through cycles, so
Yeah.
maybe it's just reorganizing itself, and it's possible that it does hold together as it moves east. I mean, at the very least, there'll be lightning, heavy rain, some hail in Mapleton, I would think, and maybe on the north side of Presque Isle, too. It's just a question of, does a tornado make it through there? And if you're in Ashland, especially if you're west of Route 11, the threat of a tornado is over. Now the
Right.
threat of a tornado is more east of Route 11, along 227 and 163, to the east of the center of Ashland. And again, this is the product. The velocity on this scan looks all right, Keith, actually.
it's a little better.
It's a little bit better.
The radar led us in that direction then, yeah.
Right. So this is where the rotation is, right around 163 and 227. And it's moving in the direction of Mapleton, Chapman, right along Route 163. So for our county viewers and listeners, if you have any family that live near Route 163 in Ashland or Mapleton, or maybe you have a family member who commutes into Presque Isle and is headed home, I wouldn't want to be on 163 or 227 right now. At the very least, you're going to have really heavy rain and bad visibility. And at the worst, there's the potential for a tornado.
Yeah, and it is interesting that just tightened up again, in which case also
Let's see if there's any update.
Do we have? We don't have any more mics, do we? Do we have any more microphones?
Not
I don't know.
sure.
I'm just thinking about like putting Ryan on 10 minutes or so because my voice is starting to.
I can. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can just swap it. So if they extend it, if they just extend it. Oh,
Okay,
you're right. I
yeah,
do have two on.
Okay.
Should I? Which one do I need?
So,
Sorry, behind the scenes talk here, right, guys. Just trying to figure out how to do this. If they extend it, we might need to
Okay.
swap just for a minute. Or you won't hear me talk for, which is great actually. You won't hear me talk for a week or so. Jess actually said keep talking.
Take over with the non-stop wall-to-wall.
And then I'll.
Mic or IFB 5 and 7.
Just one, right? The emergency.
It's one mic and one IFB.
Okay.
Well, let's
Let's just
keep
see how it
rolling
goes.
the way we
Yeah,
are.
let's see how it goes.
And if it extends, you can take a break, and for 10 minutes, and I'll take over
Yeah.
for 10 minutes.
Just carry.
Yeah.
So once again, you know, this
It's
is,
sneakily turned into 2 hours. We didn't.
Right.
Which we're happy to do is to keep people safe. You just. Yeah, that just came out of nowhere again. This thing won't die. It like keeps looking like it wants to.
we are streaming this on Facebook, by the way.
Yeah.
So if you're watching on Facebook, I'm looking for comments of people in the area. Heather says thundering like crazy. I don't know what town you're in, but Heather's in Washburn. Oh, okay. So there's thunder in Washburn.
That's
which is
actually
on the
going to
north
be, yeah,
side of
she's
the
going to be on the
storm.
north side, yeah. So probably might get some hail, maybe, probably just more heavy rain. We really need someone south of there.
Right.
We need some, I don't know that town particularly, but yeah, anything south of Ashland is where you're going to be able to see. Although, you know, we talked about this, Ryan, like your visibility for tornadoes in Maine or New England in general, usually not great.
Right.
Tree line and whatnot, so but it definitely came through places where there are houses, because if you look on that,
Right.
you know, if you zoom
we
in,
take this off.
yeah,
You can see, you know, Ashland's got some population for sure. A lot of farming. And then it does get more populated as you get into Mapleton and then Presque Isle.
yep, yeah. Like if something was on the ground, I think we're going to hear about it pretty
agree.
soon. Even if it's like damage to a barn or something, there should
Right.
be something.
And I would expect there is hail falling in part of this area too, as we talked about.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah, and that's right on the line. Like, yeah, if you get a little bit bigger than ping pong, you can start putting dents in cars,
right.
which is not great, not ideal. Yeah, it's still there. It's just skin looks all right. They're gonna
I don't think we have an update yet.
No,
from
they're gonna-
Caribou.
No.
they're gonna make a call on this soon because they've got a
Yeah,
couple minutes.
It's
For
almost out of the box. But again, if there is a tornado right now, it's right in this area, right around Route 163, headed right toward the middle of Mapleton, and in about 20 minutes it would be toward Presque Isle. So we'll put a track on where the potential tornado is. That may help just give you a little bit of a timeline. So again, if you're in Mapleton, 5:48, so we'll say, looks like they're going to do a severe thunderstorm warning.
Okay.
It looks like that just came out. So this usually implies that they're probably not going to extend the tornado warning. They just put out a severe thunderstorm warning. Let's get that over here to get the details for Aroostook County until 6:30. So this severe thunderstorm warning would include Presque Isle, Fort Fairfield, and Mapleton, the places downstream from the tornado warning storm right now. But they do note a tornado is possible. So they're still watching it. But perhaps they're not going to keep the warning up. We'll see, just in case, because it's still in the box within the tornado warning zone for another few minutes.
Right. But yeah, to Ryan's point, they don't typically double them up in that order. Like they might put a severe thunderstorm warning, then a tornado.
Usually the indication
Usually that
is
way.
if they're going to
Yeah.
do a severe thunderstorm warning downstream, they'll stick with that. But, I mean, this is still a nasty storm, and definitely the best it's looked on, or the worst it's looked on.
Yeah, that's what's
reflectivity
interesting
so
about if they
far.
let it expire is it kind of looks its best at the moment, but well, the
velocity isn't the
scan is
best.
not good. Yeah,
It's still a really strong storm, but perhaps it's not putting down a tornado at the
Yeah.
moment. And
Yeah.
as we said, these storms can cycle, which is maybe why they put the tornado possible on that severe thunderstorm warning. But hail, strong winds, lightning, heavy rain, all coming downstream. And we'll put the track on this again. And this time we'll do it more from the beginning of the storm. And there are a few more towns too.
Yep. Yeah, it is interesting how the velocity scan doesn't look good. The structure is good. There's still some pretty big hail in there. And Ryan was talking about this earlier. It's a thing, it's kind of obscure in a way. You can have a severe thunderstorm warning in which the text includes a tornado as possible.
Right.
So that's like their step down from a tornado warning, because tornado warnings trigger a bunch of things.
Right. And that's what we have in this one.
Tornado possible. So they're going to cover their bases, so to speak, on that. But yeah, I would agree that it seems unlikely. We'll obviously follow it till 5:45 either way and see what they do with it. And if it cycles back in, we're going to keep an eye on that. Also, very thankful right now for the fact that we had COVID vaccines, so we can lean this close to each other on microphones.
It's great to see
This would have been a real nightmare not that long ago. So there we go. This is it. As Ryan talked about in good detail, where the structure of the storm looked pretty good on radar, but the scans just aren't that good. So now they've gone ahead and they've put a severe thunderstorm warning with a tornado possible kind of text within that, which means they're going to probably take it down, let this one expire, and just say that, hey, this storm has a history of rotation, a history of a possible tornado, therefore that could continue, but we think that we're going to go with the severe thunderstorm warning here. And on its current path, it is still in line to hit Presque Isle at some point. It looked like it'd be around 5:55 or so, based on the speed that we last checked. Okay, so yeah, 5:55, 6 o'clock through Presque Isle. You've got Mapleton as well, and Mapleton will get hail, because the hail core is right there off to the west. We don't know how big that hail is. It was indicated ping pong size or so, which is enough to sometimes cause some damage, depending. If it gets any bigger than that, then it really starts dinging stuff up pretty quickly. And that is all east-northeast. There isn't a lot behind it, I don't think. But as usual, now that you've got this set up to the north of the warm front, you got to watch anything that comes out of here, because sometimes these will start hooking around here, and so like right there, just to keep an eye on it. I wouldn't be surprised if we come back at some point, because of these little undulations within this pattern that clearly wants to rotate on the north side of this warm front. So hopefully we don't. Hopefully they let this expire and we're good and there's no other issues. Is there anything else out here? Well, it's a bunch of stuff in Canada, but that doesn't really concern me too much. And then we'll see what happens with this line coming through the Northeast Kingdom, coming through Vermont, and that's the cold front side of things. So we'll see if that ends up producing anything beyond what it is. But my sense is that our tornado threat is front loaded here, and once we get that cold front in this zone,
And the highest threat was always going to be in this part of the state, to northern and western Maine, with that warm front coming through. With the cold front, it's probably more of a straight line wind threat, like you mentioned. And we'll have to see if these storms that are in Vermont right now even make it over the western Maine the New Hampshire mountains and the western Maine mountains. And by the way, like we should note, if you're watching this on WLBZ and you're in Bangor or Bar Harbor, it's not doing much at all right now, and it won't for several more hours. Basically, you have this first area that comes through, and that went into northern Maine, and then it's this second area that will come through tonight, and maybe a lot of this weekends before it even gets to Bangor or Bar Harbor. So it's possible some of our viewers in eastern Maine don't get much rain at all out of this whole system, just depending on how this lasts, and that's kind of how the models were showing it. It was kind of like round one went up north, and then round two maybe for western Maine later on.
Yeah, the coast wasn't getting much. In fact, what the models were picking up on, I think, was a fog bank.
Right, southerly
which
wind.
Yep. I don't know if it came on shore. I saw it lurking offshore earlier today.
Yeah, we can look. It did in some spots.
Yeah,
and actually, you can see here in down East Maine.
So good luck getting a strong storm in a fog bank.
Right.
It'd be wild, but it's pretty hard to do. It's pretty stable air.
Right.
Bar Harbor. So it came on shore hard there.
And that's why if you're watching from Bangor, you're watching from Ellsworth or Bar Harbor or Washington, Hancock counties, you're good. You're not anywhere near these storms and won't be for several more hours. So.
And we could use some rain, of course, but that's maybe tomorrow afternoon, evening we'll get that. I don't think we'll see a ton of it along the coast as far as that goes. Yeah, I don't know if they're giving any indication or what they're going to do. This is strong thunderstorm, tornado warning. Yeah. So, I mean, we've got, 2 minutes? If that?
Couple of minutes, yeah.
Yeah. So if they let it expire, then that was their decision. And then we will go off the air, or we'll go back to our regular programming. Mike,
Yeah.
I assume they're listening and they're ready to switch over whenever? Okay. Okay. So if this expires in the next 30 seconds or whatever it's going to be, we're going to go back to news programming, and then we'll continue to cover severe storms, obviously, within that.
Look of it, I don't think they'll extend.
I don't think so either. I think we're safe to go. So as soon as you guys are ready downstairs, we'll switch back over to news. We'll keep an eye on these storms. If more tornado warnings pop up, we might split the signal again between our northern and central viewing zones and our southern viewing zones. We've been doing that so that we don't overwhelm people with information that's not pertinent to them. And we do that in tornado warning situations. Okay, so we're going to sign off for now. We're going to go back to news, and we'll keep an eye on these storms. If we need to, we'll come back for wall to wall.
Thank you.